This episode of The Rundown with Ryan Uffins is brought to you by ReadyWise Outdoor. As a hunter and outdoor enthusiast, you need food that's not just convenient, but also nutritious. That's why I trust ReadyWise Outdoor. Their pro meals are designed to fuel your adventure, packed with over 30 grams of protein and more than 500 calories per serving, keeping you energized when you need it the most. Favorites like the Thai coconut cashew curry or the protein-packed breakfast skillet are not only delicious, but ready in minutes. Just add water. Plus, their freeze-dried technology keeps these meals lightweight, which are perfect for extended trips. Whether you're deep in the backcountry or preparing for a weekend camping trip, ReadyWise has your back, with meals that give you the stamina you need to go the extra mile. Their meals are made locally here in the U.S. and come with a 15-year shelf life. So head on over to ReadyWiseOutdoor.com today and explore their pro meal bundles, because your outdoor pursuits deserve great-tasting, high-quality meals. And be sure to enter promo code Ryan20 to save 20% off at checkout. That's Ryan20 to save 20% off at ReadyWiseOutdoor.com.
Need a cooler that keeps your food and drinks ice cold on your next adventure? Look no further than Blue Coolers from Caddis Sports. With the industry-leading insulation and rugged durability, these coolers are perfect for camping trips, tailgates, and all of your outdoor adventures. The built-in wheels make transportation a breeze, no matter how heavy the load. Whether you're fishing, hosting a barbecue, or at deer camp, Blue Coolers has you covered with unmatched performance at an affordable price. Blue Coolers are made right here in the USA, so get yours today at caddissports.com. Be sure to use promo code Ryan10 to save 10% off at checkout. That's Ryan10 to save 10% off at caddissports.com.
You're listening to The Rundown with Ryan Uffins, the podcast where we dive headfirst into the wild. Whether you're an aspiring hunter or an adventurer seeking the untamed, together we'll explore the strategies and stories that lead to success in the great outdoors.
Today we welcome Donnie Vincent, an explorer, biologist, and filmmaker. His passion for the outdoors go beyond a career. It's a calling. Donnie has journeyed through some of the most remote corners of the earth, capturing the deep connection between humans and the wild. His films reveal that conservation and hunting are intertwined. We're excited to have him on the show to share his insights and experiences. Donnie, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you for having me. It's a real privilege. Thank you.
When I reached out to you on Instagram, I was like, there's no way Donnie's going to respond to me. You were super gracious. And yeah, I'll just share with the folks a little bit. I had started hunting. There's two things that happened. My son, he's 23 now, but he's like, Dad, I want to hunt. We've never hunted. And he's like, let's go get our hunter safety. We'll put in, and if we draw out the same unit, we'll go get bows and get started with archery hunting. And I'm like, there's no way we're both going to draw out the same unit. Well, sure enough, we did. And then I got to go find a bow. And I was telling a buddy of mine about what we were going to do. And he's like, dude, have you seen Winds of Adak? And I'm like, no. He said, you know who Donnie Vincent is? No, but I know who you are now. And I watched that film, man, and it just completely got me hooked. I mean, and the way you go about your hunting and the way you connect with the land and the animals is pretty impressive.
It sounds, it's surreal to hear about yourself. Nobody ever likes hearing about their own resume or hearing about themselves, or let alone hearing their own voice. So, and I'm one and the same. But where did you and your son hunt, or is that coming up this year?
So we went out and we did our first hunt just here on the Wasatch back here.
Okay.
Yep. I don't know how familiar you are with Utah, but like we're in Davis County. So it's kind of like a backyard hunt. It's about an hour and a half trek up the mountain. We go up and kind of fall back in behind the city between Salt Lake and Morgan. And we went back there, and I really only have, we have two hunting stories that are worth telling. But yeah, so we went out 4 years ago. We got an OT. We didn't get anything on our deer tags that we put in for, but we bought an OTC L tag.
Okay.
And we went out, and I had some friends that had hunted up there before, and hey, there's this water hole that if you can get to it, like it's pretty, like you'll get something. But they wouldn't tell me exactly where it was. They had to make me work for it. We've since found it, and it is a trek. I mean, you got to be in shape to be able to get down there and get the cow. But as we're going down there, I'll just say this is like my only hunting story, so I'll tell this, and then I got like a million questions for you.
I love it. Tell it.
But yeah, so we're up there, and my son and his buddy, like they're like, hey, we're gonna go down and see if we can find anything, because it was kind of on the tail end of archery. So about this time right now, 4 years ago, and we're
we're down on this slope, and the breeze is coming up again. And I'm like, all right, so let's just we're trying to find this watering hole. It's the last day of the hunt. So yeah, it was like this weekend, 4 years ago, and we're going down this, and it's a decline. I mean, you got a ton of deadfall you're going through to get down there. But anyway, they had gone down a little bit further to try and find something, and we had heard some elks bugling, and all of a sudden, I'd never heard an elk in the wild before. I mean, I'm talking like walking, and all of a sudden, I hear these like branches and twigs just snapping behind me, and I turn around, and there's this bull, and I don't understand like the scoring system, but he's like 30 yards walking across me, and he's got this like massive rack, and I'm thinking to myself, there is no way that this is seriously going to be my first elk that I take. And because of the stuff that I've watched with you, I'm like, okay, all I can see is from the shoulders up. He's in this scrub oak. I don't have a clean shot on vinyls. And I told myself, I don't want to take a bad shot and just like injure the animal. And so like I'm sitting there waiting, and I'm looking ahead of where he's going. And there's an opening. And I'm sitting there watching him. I'm just tracking him, and he hasn't noticed me at all. And so I draw back, and he's 3 yards from stepping into this opening. And I'm thinking, this is going to be it. And then all of a sudden, like back of my neck, I felt this breeze. And the second it happened, like, this is my first hunt. All I know is wind is bad, right?
Yeah.
That's all that I've understood is like wind's bad. Like, make sure that you're upwind from. Anyway, I feel the breeze. He stops, kind of cocks his eyes and looks over at me for a split second. Again, he stops like 3 yards from this opening, and he was gone. I mean, but yeah, so that was like my first experience with hunting, and it was enough that I'm like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. I mean, it sucked that it got away, but yeah, it got me, just reeled me in.
Yeah, but it's also kind of cool, right? It's also kind of cool that it got away, because then you kind of get to see this, you get to kind of feel that agony of defeat, and you get to kind of feel that, I can't even tell you how many stories I've heard and experienced myself where he just has to take one more step, literally one more step, and I'm going to get my shot, and then he doesn't.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to having more of those stories. I mean, that's the thing for me is, like right now, I tell everybody I'm a hunter. I'm not a killer, I'm a hunter, because the only thing I've done is hunted. But yeah, we went up opening weekend this last weekend. We actually made it down to the watering hole. We finally found it, and there was nothing. I mean, but I mean, there was some signs. We found like a watering track, but we didn't see anything. We're going back out again this weekend. We're going to go see if we can Camp Bill attack, try and get another elk here. But yeah, it was wild. We had this bad thunderstorm that had come in, and so we had gotten up there early. We get down to this thing, just nothing's happening all day long. And, yeah, I mean, it's a super cool experience. So it's something that he and I do together, but we're like, hey, we should start heading up. And he's like, well, let's follow this path that's the opposite way, like steep slope. It took us 3.5 hours to climb out of this thing that we'd gone down into.
Yeah.
And then we see like the storm cloud coming, and it caused floods out here, like in the valley, like down in Utah County. I mean, it was a bad storm, and I'd never smelt lightning before.
Yeah.
And we, right as we got out of that canyon, it like hit us, and we were still like 2.5 miles from the truck, like winds blowing 60 miles an hour, thunder's just, I'm going, this is how it ends for me. I'm going into a lightning shoot.
This is it.
It's so loud, flashing all around us. And anyway, we kind of eventually we just worked our way back, and we were going to stay up there for another day. But to be honest, we were a little bit. It shook us, man.
Mm-hmm.
It shook us. I'm going like I don't know, because we couldn't tell how it was coming. We had no reception. I mean, we're not far. We're an hour and a half from our home, but still, where we were, I'm like, I can't tell what's coming. Let's just pack it up and get out. So yeah, so we're gonna go back out again this weekend.
Fun, super fun. That's really cool. I love that. I dig it that your first experiences are in the backcountry, and you're getting some elevation, and you're able to carry a pack and see huge. I mean, to have your first hunt and see a huge branch antlered bull would, I mean, that's just incredible. Most guys,
it blew my
it's
mind.
crazy. That's crazy.
It blew my mind. I mean, we've seen other stuff up there too, and that's the thing is there's a moose with some calves up there, and it's just the thing to me is, you hear about the prophets going to the mountains, right? Like I go up there and it's just a reset mentally, even if we don't do anything, but just the things like we're up there, we're watching this little squirrel just jump around while we're down at this watering hole, and just it's the little things that to me just like blow my mind. It's like this planet that we get to live in, and there's so many people that don't take advantage. And I was one of them. Like I wasn't raised in a family of hunters. We didn't have anybody really that I could like lean on to teach me. My son, he teaches me, and we go out, we shoot all the time. Like I feel very comfortable shooting the bow like 70, 80 yards. Like I feel confident in my ability to be able to take an animal and put it where it needs to be.
Yep.
It's the close one. That 30 yard is where I feel like my groupings get playing.
Sometimes it's easier to shoot long distance, right? Sometimes your pin is floating a little bit more at close, and at distance you're dialed in, right? You're trying to keep that pin, that wobble as small as possible. So sometimes it's easier and you're more detached from the target. So, you have this greater difference in error. And so you just kind of let it fly. And it's shocking how tight of a group you can shoot out to 100+ yards.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun. It's something that we absolutely love, and I'm gonna do it until I can't anymore. But that's the other thing. It's like change the way I exercise and condition. Yep. I felt good. I mean, I'm 45, my boy's 23, and I was going up that hill trying to get out of there, like telling him like, "Hey, pick it up, let's go." So like I had prepared for it. I was ready for it. I felt good that I was pushing him along. I was expecting him. I'm going to let him.
That's really cool. That's awesome. That's a really good story.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's the only one I got, but it's a fun one. So tell me, have you had any experiences where you've been out there and it's been sketchy and you're going like, what are we doing?
Oh, many, man. That's a great question. I've had that happen to me a lot. I've had that happen to me several times on canoe trips. I've had it happen to me. I've had it happen to me on the sides of mountains. I've had it happen to me in the middle of the ocean. And I was hunting bow hunting Dall sheep in Alaska a few years ago in October in the Chugach Mountains. It's a really young mountain range, a steep, dangerous mountain range, and it was a lot of snow, a lot of ice on that particular trip. And I had to cross some cliffs to get in on a big ram that I had my eye on, and it was just very little room for error. If I would have slipped or one of my guys would have slipped, we would have certainly lost our lives. So that was, that's one of those things where you're just really, really paying attention at your boot leather, and you're looking at the sole of your boot. You're looking at all the little edges and all the little nooks and crannies, and everything is hyper focused. And you're doing everything one-handed because you have your bow in one hand. You're holding on to the rock with the other hand, and then the photographer, he's got his camera in one hand. He's holding on to the rock with the other hand, and then we've had times where we've been in the ocean. Winds of 8 comes to mind, as we had some really scary waves, really disorganized waves, and it just felt like, if you look on a map, it's the entire Bering Sea to our north. You look to our south, it's the entire Gulf of Alaska. There's a couple little pieces of land in the Aleutian chain, and then the next piece of dirt isn't until Hawaii. And so it's this massive, massive area of ocean. You have deep water coming to shallow water. You have huge winds. You have huge currents, and it results in very disorganized. You see the waves are kind of peaked out, and it's not like a lake where they're just flowing like this. They're all over the place, and your boat is skidding down them, and your boat's falling off the top, and it's you feel as small as you could possibly feel. And like in the back of my mind, like these waves sink, or whatever it is, ice, accidents, like these waves sink massive crab boats every year or every other year. And here we are in a little 50-foot boat or whatever. And, so there's been I've been in lightning storms. I think being on top of a mountain, or being in a boat, or being in a canoe in the middle of a lake, are the most revealing. It's the most most exposed you can feel during a thunder lightning storm. And I've had them on the tops of mountains, and somehow when you're at 5,000 feet, it feels like you're way closer to the lightning than when you're at 0 or at 100 or 500. And when you're at 5,000, it's just like, man, is that lightning going through me? Like, it feels like it's hitting the mountain. It feels like it feels like you're standing in the clouds that the thunder's going off. And I've had that before. I've also been crossing huge lakes. I was in northern Ontario one time crossing this huge lake in a canoe, and there was this really big swell of waves, and I was paddling, and my canoe's going up the wave and down the wave, and I'm paddling, and then I didn't even notice, but the huge swell just kept getting smaller and smaller, and I was like, I didn't even notice until all of a sudden I was canoeing, and I was like, whoa, it's glass. It's flat calm, like it's really nice. And I was like, wow, it's really nice. Then I turned around, it was just hell was coming. The blackest storm had just sucked all the energy out of, the lake that I was crossing. And then, I think there were tornadoes that came down in that area. There were trees. And when I woke up in the morning, there were trees down everywhere. But many, many times I felt very exposed.
I'm new to hunting. For somebody that's going to go out into like a new area that they haven't been into, like what preparations or maybe misconceptions would you tell people maybe don't account for as they're preparing to go out on some of these more remote hunts?
Yeah, well, first things, like if you're gonna, looking into an area, the first thing I would recommend to somebody, and this seems so obvious, but it changes all the time, but I kind of try to become an expert at the regulations, right? Really, a lot of times hunters, they'll talk to their dad or their uncle or a friend or the guy at the bow shop, and they'll say, oh yeah, that's an over-the-counter area. You need a prairie elk tag for that. And you can get a lot of rumor and a lot of misconceptions. So one of the things that I would recommend is somebody that really understand the rules and regulations, what tags they need, what hunting licenses they need. One time I hunted in Montana, and I got to this outfitter at the Milk River, Eric Albus at the Milk River, and he's like, I had all my stuff. He's like, you have all your tags? And I was like, yep. And he's like, do you have an archery stamp? And I said, nope. And he said, yep, the state of Montana requires an archery stamp, and for some reason they don't sell you one when you buy your tag online. So I had to go get my archery stamp. So it's just little things like that. But, picking an area apart via maps and understanding the weather and understanding what the extremes are. Like you said, if a thunderstorm comes in Utah, you might be from the Midwest, where when a thunderstorm comes, it's loud and windy and rainy. It might spawn a tornado, but in Utah, it's not going to spawn a tornado, but you certainly should probably know about flash floods and understand that a little dry creek bed that you crossed 5 hours ago might be a raging torrent now that looks like something you could probably cross because it doesn't look real. It just looks fast, but it could be a life-ending situation. And so just looking at things like that, and then when you're doing things like I do and going into the backcountry for caribou, moose, grizzly bears, things like that, if you don't have a guide like for black bear, moose, or caribou, you really want to start breaking down your system and understanding, okay, what does your camp look like? Okay, I need a tent. I need a sleeping pad. I need a sleeping bag. What type of sleeping bag do I need? What temperature ranges am I looking at? How wet is it going to be? And then you start looking at your stove and the type of fuel that you want to use and the food that you want to eat and how you're going to get clean water. Are you just dipping your bottle in a mountain stream, or are you using a water purifier because you're camped next to a lake that has beavers in it, or a lake that just certainly has microbes in it? And so then you break down your shelter, you break down your clean drinking water. And then, from there you move on to your clothing and understand what layers you're going to need, what level of rain gear you're going to need. Are you going to need something like Kuiu or Sitka? Or are you going to need something that if you're in a true deluge, are you going to need like a PVC rain gear, something like from Grundon's or whatever, that's true plastic, that cheap stuff that's just truly, truly waterproof. And so you start breaking all those things down. And then of course it's understanding the animals. Are you going to an area that has a lot of bulls, a few bulls, a lot of females, a few females? Would it be better to get a cow tag? Better to get a bull tag? And if there is a bull tag, are you buying like a 5-point side tag to where there's very few 5 points? So just really understanding all your little categorical things to make your hunt a success. And then understanding a friend of mine calls them unkunks, the unknown unknowns. So what do you have for weather in the area? What is really dangerous? Like I leave for Alaska next Sunday, or a week from Sunday. And the area that I'm going has, I'm not going to say a lot, but experiences volcanic eruptions. It experiences earthquakes on relatively regular. There's massive, massive bears where I'm going. And so these are things that I kind of have to understand. I'm flying in little airplanes, so I have to prepare myself, as weird as this is. I have to try to keep my gear and my satellite SOS device. Like, that's something I have to keep close to me when I'm in the airplane, because if I get in an airplane crash, I'm most likely going to lose my life. But if I don't lose my life, I have to have a secondary process of getting out of that. So it's literally just, I think people look at other people's hunts, my own or other people's whose hunts are a little bit more public. They look at, like a big set of caribou antlers or something, and they think like, oh man, how do I get one of those? And really, it's about a system of systems, and really starting to break it down into digestible pieces. Anyone can do it. Even big fat guys, you can do it. You just got to go take one step at a time. Or little skinny guys that are kind of, if they're weak, you have to just carry less gear and make multiple trips. Like, anyone can do it for the most part. And so it's just breaking down the system of systems, really understanding, and then being honest with yourself, right? If you have a crippling fear of bears, maybe this isn't the area for you that has giant bears, because even though the bears probably aren't going to harass you, maybe you're not going to sleep at night. Maybe every little twig that snaps at night, you're going to be like, what is that? What was that? What was that? I thought I saw that bush move over there. I remember the first few times I was in grizzly country, it didn't bother me, but I remember when I would cross through valleys that were choked with brush, like I felt like I was going to be just snatched down by a grizzly bear. So I would say that's what I would recommend to somebody, is understanding the regulations, understanding the animals, and then breaking everything down in systems of systems. Google other people's gear lists, find out, you take somebody like my friend Aaron Snyder from Kafaru. Aaron does a lot of backcountry hunts. So Aaron might have, and I've done a lot of backcountry hunts, but does that mean I can't learn from Aaron? No, I might look at his gear list and he says, hey, for blisters, I use Leuco tape. And I sit there and I go, I've never even heard of Leuco tape. So I look up Leuco tape, and then I look it up and figure out how to patch my blister with Leuco tape. And I've taken a little piece from Aaron. And so I would recommend that people kind of look at other people's systems and then start to formulate their own on what they can afford, and then the type of gear that they're going to need.
That's awesome. You talked a little bit about, being scared, seeing grizzlies and stuff like that. Like, is there any advice that you would give to somebody as far as just being aware of like the wildlife and the habitat as they go into some of the backcountry type hunts and more remote things?
Yeah, I think it's just understanding really what's there. Mostly in the United States, really the animals you're really thinking about are mountain lions would be a significant one. Grizzly bears and brown bears. I guess if you're going to be way up in the north, you're going to be thinking about polar bears. But black bears are less of a significance. They do kill people, and everyone likes to quote this statistic. Whether it's true or not, I'm not sure. But black bears kill about 3 times as many people as grizzly bears. But people also have to realize that there are black bears almost everywhere, and that people are around black bears a lot. And black bears are opportunistic. They do kill. And it's not just that they kill little old ladies and little kids, which sometimes happens, but I know a couple of guys that were really, really strong mountain men. And I know one in particular that was killed by a black bear, killed on an archery hunt, and the bear consumed him a little bit. But it's understanding like really what you have, like where I'm going. I've not hunted a ton in Montana, and I've not hunted a ton in Wyoming, but I have friends that have, and they talk all the time about, hey, we're seeing a lot of bears, we're seeing a lot of grizzly bears, and we're seeing a lot of aggressive bears. And so they were kind of talking to me. They said, do you see a lot of bears in Alaska? And I said, well, it depends on where I am. Sometimes I see a ton of bears. And then they said, well, how aggressive are they? And I've been around aggressive bears, and I've been around bears that aren't aggressive. So you just kind of have to feel it all out. But for instance, where I'm going a week from Sunday is the biggest bears in the world. It's the northern part of the Alaska Peninsula, very similar to the bears on Kodiak, and peninsula bears are very, very large bears. But when I'm there, the salmon are going to be running. So will I see bears? Probably. If I have to go and cross some of these ravines and steep ravines, which I very likely will have to go through this brush choked, and I mean I do mean brush choked. It's head high, 15 feet tall, like impenetrable brush. Like you can't even fall down, Ryan, because the brush catches you if you fall. Like if you stumble and fall, you just kind of go like this, and then you stand back up. It's nasty. That's thorns. But those bears, for the most part, are going to be combing the beaches for dead whales, dead seals, kelp, salmon that have just washed up on shore. And they're also going to be in the river systems, catching fresh fish and eating them as fast as they can. So I'm not worried about these bears. Even if I shouldn't say I'm not worried. I'm understanding that they are probably busy, and even if I run into them, they're probably very full. So unless I bump a bear, which is an entire possibility, into where I scare him significantly enough that he attacks me, that's the one thing that I really have in my mind's eye. And this is a rifle hunt, so I will have a bolt action rifle with me. I don't believe there's going to be any other weapons with us. Sometimes I've brought a shotgun for keeping the tent. If I'll bring like a slug gun if we're archery hunting. I've never carried a pistol. I know some guys carry pistols, but I've never. I haven't been a pistol guy as of yet. I think somebody just killed a bear with a pistol, was recently attacked and shot a bear. But so it's just understanding. And then like mountain lions, also, you're just looking at the biology of the animal. So if you're in an area with mountain lions, and almost all of these animals, like everything, like anything down from a child's fable up to what the grizzly old mountain man will kind of tell you, they get these animals get turned into monsters, right? They get sensationalized into the blood dripping off their teeth and claws, and he's a man eater. You hear those terms, right? Man eater, and once that bear tastes blood, he's coming for you. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Most of these animals are just going about their business, and even mountain lions, which do kill people occasionally. You just have to have your wits about you, right? And you have to be able to keep looking behind you and just understand what you're dealing with.
Yeah, we've had, I wouldn't say we've had mountain attacks, but just all along the Wasatch frontier, we've got mountain lions that are starting to come down, and they are eating
Pets.
cats.
Yep.
Pets. Yeah. Not to confuse mountain lions with the alleged Haitians that are happening.
It's all on the table. It's all on the table.
Yeah. Everything. But yeah, so they come down like Utah right now. Like if you've got your hunter safety license, like if you come across a mountain lion, you can take one.
Yeah.
They're trying to thin those out here. My boy, when he saw your Instagram post with that mountain lion over your shoulders, he's like, I want to recreate that one day. So if you don't mind, would you mind sharing a little bit about that mountain lion hunt that you had gone on?
Yes. It was a really cool experience. Not something I was ever going to do. I never wanted to hunt lions. I had zero interest in running animals with dogs. It's just not my style. And I just didn't think it was something that I even really wanted to be a part of or witness. And then a very good friend of mine, Ben Storak, he bought a new territory in British Columbia called Arcadia Outfitters, and he guides for cougars, black bears, and then he does some mule deer, and then he does some California bighorn sheep. And so he said, hey, would you like to come up and do a cougar hunt? And I said, I really don't want to, Ben. I said, I don't have a lot of interest in it. And he said, well, listen, he said, you're always the one kind of talking about on podcast or in film or whatever. He's like, you're always kind of talking about living your life and experiencing life, and like, don't judge a book by its cover. And just because you have some degradative thoughts about hunting or hunters, like make sure you give them a chance and have a conversation with hunters or go hunting and try to understand like what it is like before you judge a book by its cover. So he's like, why don't you come lion hunting? And then if it's not for you, then you'll know it. But why don't you come and meet the hounds and see the country? And I said, you know what, that's a good point. I said, I'll come out. And so he called me and he said, hey, we have a huge cat here right now. We call him the Blood Paw Tom because he tore one of his pads on his back left foot, I think. Right or left foot. But he tore a pad, and every time he takes a step, there's about a dime-sized blood spot in his track. So he said at the time, unless I'm misremembering, he said like, hey, the ranchers kind of want him gone, and the biologists kind of want him gone because he is preying heavily on the California bighorn sheep, of which the biologists are trying to really manage and trying to save their populations in the area because they're very fragile. Sheep are very fragile creatures. If they get horrible winters, it wipes them out. If they get livestock diseases from domestic sheep, it wipes them out. If they get, too many lions, too many wolves, it wipes them out. Too much hunting pressure from man, it wipes them out. And so I said, yeah, I'll come up. So he got a beautiful snowstorm. I traveled to British Columbia. He picked me up in town, and we went to drove up into his camp. And we went and looked for that cat, and we had a houndsman in camp named Robin, and we had all of his dogs. And we went and looked for that cat. Ben and I went and walked along the Fraser River and talk about another hunt, really steep cliffs. We were walking in really safe stuff. We were walking in like cow pastures and stuff up above the cliffs, but we had to cross some of these cliffs. And there was one, I'll never forget this. I'm 6 feet tall. Ben's about 6'2", 6'3". So we came to this river that was frozen solid. And Ben just merely stepped across. He just took a big step and he just went, whoop, and he stepped across and he kept going. And I tried to step across, but I couldn't get it. And it was like a nightmare. It was like my worst nightmare. Because when I stepped onto the ice, this little falls, this little stream only went about 100 yards and then poured off like 1,000-foot straight down cliff. And so it was glare ice. And so I just thought to myself, what if I start crossing this and I start sliding? It's one of those controlled slides where like, I have nothing to stop me. And so like, what if I sit here and slowly slide down this thing and right off this edge? And so it was kind of gnarly, but I ended up going up the stream until it was narrow enough for me to jump across, and I got across. But I was mad at Ben because he just stepped across. And anyway, so we got on that cat's track, and Ben and I followed him for, I think it was about 20 kilometers on foot. And we were just slowly meandering in his track, and we could see it was him the whole time. And it was so cool because he led us to all of his kills that he had made in days or weeks prior. He led us to, he hadn't killed any California bighorn rams, but he killed several ewes. I don't think he killed any lambs, and he killed several mule deer doe. And so we were tracking them, and we were finding all these kills. And then we came over this hill. We'd been walking all day. We started in the dark, and it was now getting late in the day. And we came over this hill, and William Altman is one of our director of photography here at Sick Manta. And William he was filming the hunt. He goes, there he is. And we looked down, and he was on top of a mule deer doe. And he was on top of her, and he was feeding on her. She was already dead. He had just killed her probably the night before, and he was feeding on her. And when he came over, he's like, there he is. And I had a bow, but it was probably about 80 yards. And that cat looked back at us, and he just bristled up black, and his muscles just got really big, and he slowly stepped off of that doe. And he just slowly walked away from us, and he kept, like, every 3 or 4 steps, he'd look back at us. And I remember thinking he looked jet black. And his muscles, he just looked massive, and his belly was kind of hanging down. And I remember how thick his tail was. And he just walked up over that hill, and we kept going after him, and we weren't running. We were just picking him apart. But I remember thinking how cool it was that we could have killed that cat with a rifle with no dogs. Like, we could have just killed it straight up by walking it down. And then he kind of turned, and he started going up into where the snow was getting really deep. The snow that we were in all day was like 4 or 5 inches deep. And he started going up into the hills, and he eventually got up to where the snow was like mid-thigh deep. And you could see where he went up a frozen river, and it was so cool, Ryan. You could see where his tail was just swathing through the fresh snow. Yeah, and it was so pretty, and like these towering pines, and the snow was falling down. You could just see, because the snow was so fresh, you could just paint the whole picture of how he was getting away. And then we called the houndsman, because the houndsman, he wouldn't use his dogs at all along those cliffs, because he's like, they'll all fall to their death, or some of them will fall to their death, and we're not going to do that. And so we released the hounds up into the mountains, and they're baying, and they're making all their noise, and they're going up in the hills, and it was way more cool than I thought. So I was just hustling. It was an extremely physical experience. I'm going as hard as I can. I remember I was wearing a Fjallraven Singy expedition jacket. That's that big green jacket with the furred hood that you see in that photo. I was wearing that jacket. It's a down jacket with a canvas outer layer. And I remember my sweat had soaked all the way through the jacket. It was basically like kind of running down the backside of the jacket. Yeah. It was intense. And then some of the guys were like, they were so taxed. And I ended up getting up there and I was the first one to the cat. And I get up there and he's just standing in the tree and I'll never forget it. He's standing on a limb. The dogs are right below him barking their heads off. And here I thought he was going to be snarling and like swiping his paws because like that's what I'd seen in movies and stuff.
Yeah.
I got up there and he's just standing on a limb. He's just literally looking down at the dogs and he'd look out. He's just looking around. He'd look down at the dogs like it was as though he didn't have a care in the world. He didn't look stressed out. He didn't look scared. He was just like, yeah, I came up to this tree to get rid of these stupid dogs. And like, he was just sitting up there. And then when I walked up, a couple of the other guys started coming up and then they were kind of talking. And I don't think he liked that. So he bound out and ran down the hill. The dogs all took off after him. I took off after him. And then he got into another tree where he had a lot more cover. I think we, as humans, bugged him way more than the hounds. And so I snuck up to this tree, and he had a lot of branches around him. And I remember I could see his front shoulder, I could see a little bit of his vitals, and I could see another big branch right here. And I couldn't see anything else of the cat. And Ben came up next to me, and I said, so what do I do now? And he's like, well, if you want to shoot him, shoot him. If you don't want to shoot him, I'm going to shoot him because he's like, the biologists want me to get rid of some cats, right? So, and that was one thing that I did that I failed to mention to you is that I said, Ben, let me come and talk to some of your ministry biologists about the cat numbers because I don't want to come and kill a cat if like you guys don't have a ton of cats. So I went and met with the biologists and they were like, we would prefer if you took 2. If you know, like, because you can legally take 2 there, I think, or at least you could then. They're like, we would prefer if you could took 2 because we're trying to get the cat numbers down. They're very successful after the sheep. So anyway, I was shooting a Hoyt at the time and I just came to full draw and I just settled my pin on his vitals and I shoot a hinge. I just slowly walked into my hinge and the arrow hit him. He dove out of the tree and he ran down and he died down at the bottom. And I remember getting down there and they got the hounds and everything. And I remember getting down there and he looked so huge in the tree. That's one thing I'll never forget. He looked like he was 300 pounds in the tree. Big belly was hanging down. His paws were like this big and everything. He just looked so massive in the tree. I was like, God, that's got to be a 300-pound cat, even though I know that doesn't exist. And we got down there to the deep snow and it looked like a house cat. I was like, it looks so small. Really? Yeah, because the snow had all kind of caved in on it. It looked so small. And I was like, this is so weird. And the houndsman, Robin, told me, he's like, Donnie, that's a massive cat. And I was like, why does it look so small? He's like, it's just the way the snow went. And we're sitting there quiet. And I was like, you know, because I'm a filmmaker, so we want this to look pretty. We don't necessarily want to sensationalize anything, but we want this to look pretty and respectable and honest. So I was sitting there looking at this cat and I go, well, now what do we do? And I'm like, the sun's going down. Like, do I just drag him out by his paw? And we're sitting there and Sam Sohol, do you know who Sam is?
I don't.
He'd be a great guest on your podcast. He's a photographer. He's out of South Dakota. He's a really cool guy, really, really wholesome, honest, conservationist guy. And he was there filming the hunt. And I said, well, now what are we going to do? And he goes, you know, the old timers carried him out. And I said, what'd you say? And he said, the old timers carried him out. I go, what do you mean? He goes, there's old pictures and paintings and stuff of these old cowboys, like shooting these cats with like lever action. And they take them out either draped over their horse or they take them out draped over their shoulders. And he's like, there's some really cool photos of even, I think there was an older woman in California that used to kill cats. And there's pictures of her like carrying these cats out on her shoulders. And so we picked that cat up and he ended up being 185 pounds, but we picked that cat up and put him on the shoulders and hiked him out and the snow was falling off the trees. And it was just like,
it's an epic photo, man.
It was surreal, dude. It was surreal. And then we ate that cat, Ryan. And
I remember reading something about like that you had eaten that and you had some other folks that were like, I'm not going to eat it.
Yeah, like the guy, the houndsman told me that he had eaten cats before and I call total bullshit. Like I could see it in his face. I'm like, have you ever eaten one, Ryan? He's like, oh, I've eaten them. And I go, or not Ryan. His name was just kind of what was his name? I just said that a minute ago. Robin. His name was Robin. I go, Robin, have you ever eaten? He goes, yeah, I mean, it's it's all right. And I looked at the head guy, Ben, and I go, have you ever eaten them? He's like, no. He's like, but it's not good. And then there's another guy named Dawson, and he's like, I've never eaten them. I'm like, well, we're eating this one. And they're like, well, we can try it, but we're not eating like the whole thing. And it's like, we're eating the whole thing. Or I'm eating the whole thing. Like, we're eating some. So I butcher the whole thing. I skin it. And I don't even really skin it. It's actually sitting right over there. You can't see it, but it's hanging on the wall over there. I just have it as a regular skin. But I skin it out and I break it all down. And we took the inner loins and both back straps, and we made medallions out of them, and we cooked them on the grill at the cabin. And then we took the one hind quarter, and we made a huge roast, seasoned it all up, seared it, put it in carrots and potatoes and gravies and all that stuff, or rather beef broth, put it in the oven. And we were celebrating because we had killed a big cat, and so we had a couple of cold beers, and the back straps and the inner loins never made it to the kitchen table. They were gone. Everyone just kept grabbing them, like this huge cat, like the size of a deer. Both back straps and inner loins were gone before we sat down to have dinner. And then the roast was destroyed. Like the people ate the roast so fast. If this tells you anything, we had bighorn sheep and we had mountain lion, and there was bighorn sheep left at the end of the dinner and nothing left of the mountain lion. And then at the end, Dawson, who's a good friend of mine, he's a really amazing logger up there in BC and guide. He asked me, he lives in BC, he lives off the grid with his family. And he's like, may I take the rest of the cat home to my sons and my wife? And I said, absolutely. And so he took the rest. We packaged it all up beautifully. We vacuum packed it, and he took it home for his family to have because they literally need the meat from some of the hunts that we do to get his family like through the winter. And so it was a phenomenal experience. I want to go cat hunting again. That's something I never, ever wanted to go, and now I want to go again.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we're looking for them. I don't know that, we're not going to take any dogs up here or do anything, but, this winter as we get our extended tag and we're up there looking around, we'll definitely keep our eyes peeled. But that's good to know. I may have to hit you up and get that recipe.
Yeah, and
you guys put together. And
you can walk them down, Ryan. So if you cut a track and it's a fresh snow, just slowly slip through there. Like they're hyper alert. But if you catch them hunting mule deer or hunting elk or whatever, and you catch them, like, especially if you have a rifle, like you can get a drop. You can definitely get the drop on one. And I have a couple of buddies that have killed them without dogs, with bows and rifles, and it can definitely be done. But it's a fantastic game animal. They're fantastic. And I understand some people are talking about closing down their seasons, and it's a travesty. Our wildlife are regulated by people that don't understand wildlife systems and hunting and fishing. And it's a real travesty that is the way it is.
Yeah, it's I'm learning. All this stuff is new, and the more I talk to people, and the more I'm getting into it. Like you really do, because like it's like you talk about the hunter's paradox. You talked about not wanting to go and kill this cat.
Yeah.
But there's a fine line between creating a healthy environment for animals to thrive and an environment where they're going to suffer. Some of these animals are going to die regardless.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if a well-placed arrow or shot is going to alleviate the suffering, a lot quicker, because it's like most other wildlife are going to be eaten, starved to death, or freeze to death.
Yeah.
Fine. So it's like if you can help keep the population healthy and thriving, that's part of why I thought, I want to get into hunting, and yes, I'd love to fill my freezer with some meat. And yeah, if we can get a cat, now I'm convinced that I want to get it.
It's amazing, man.
I'm excited. If we end up getting something, I'll have to keep you posted.
Yeah.
But so one thing you did mention, and something I've been anxious for, is like a new film. And you had said that you recorded that cat hunt. Is that something that is going to be available for people, like in the coming?
It is. I have a lot of films coming out, man. Like we we are about to embark on a big production run. And so we have, if I didn't film anything else new, I could make films for the next 5 years. I could probably come out
man.
with 10 to 12 films right now without filming another second.
Well, take my money, Donnie.
Well, that's the thing is there.
I've got all of them on Apple TV, all your shows, and it's, I mean, yeah. And if anybody out there's listening, you haven't seen Rivers Divide, or you haven't seen The Other Side or Terra Nova, like, I don't know what you're doing, but go get those films and watch them.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've got more films coming, it's got me stoked. When was the last film you released? Was it Winds of Adak?
It was
that the last
It was
film?
Winds of Adak. Yeah.
So did that come out in 2020?
Something like that. Yeah.
I think
was before
it did, because
COVID.
that was okay. So that was right when I had I had started hunting, and my, like I said, my buddy's like, dude, you got to check this out. And I watched that, and then I just bought all of them.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, there's a lot of work. Like I know I've said it in the past, like work is coming. We're going to do this, but we literally have ironed out a production system where it's going to be at minimum, a minimum a film a year.
Do you have? Can you share when you think the first film is going to be dropping, or your next film is going to be dropping?
I think, should things work out, I think our next big production will come out in February.
Okay.
Yep.
Man, good.
And that's basically
excited with
because
that.
I'm gone September, October, November, December.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, going out, living the dream.
Yeah.
Hey, so since we're talking a little about film, let me ask you, like, you're such an incredible storyteller. Like, how do you approach that in your films? And like, how your films are so educational. Like how is your intent to include that into the film in your storytelling process to kind of like tell the story of what you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great
Does that make
question.
sense?
I see things. There's two things that I kind of I learned how to become a storyteller from a freshman English teacher in college, and I wish I remembered her name, and I could probably find it in my college transcripts. But she, we had to write a fictional story, and it had to be like 5 pages or something like that for our professors. And so I wrote this story. And I wrote this story. I honestly don't even remember what the story was about, but it was about this guy chasing a girl. Believe it or not, I wrote a romance. And it was about this guy was chasing a girl, and he was, I'll make some of this up because I really don't remember, but he was a hunter. I do remember, like, I made him a hunter, and I also made him a football player, and it was fall, and he was chasing this girl, and he was really interested in her. And I wrote this story, and then what the professor had was, she said, write a rough draft. Then you had to set up office hours with her. And so you'd come in, you'd hand her your paper. Well, you'd hand your paper to her early. She would read it, and then you'd set up office hours with her to come in and discuss your story. So I went in there, and I remember I was like, I went in there, sat down with her, and she was this little diminutive little woman. She was awesome. And she's like, I see you've got something in you. There's something here. And I said, oh, thank you. And she's like, but you're a horrible writer. And I was like, okay, that's like, just rip the Band-Aid off. And she's like, you have no ability to convey the story that's living in your head. And she's like, I can see that. She's like, I can see the story is in your head. I see the elements here, but you're horrible at telling a story. I was like, okay, well, teach me. And she's like, don't tell me the story. Show me through your words the story. Don't tell me that your main character, Jack, is chasing a pretty girl. She's like, tell me about Jack and tell me about the girl and let me form my own picture of them from details that you've brought. Does the girl have, is she, I won't get into details, but is she a voluptuous woman? Is the car that Jack drives is an old piece of crap, or the door squeaks? Don't tell me his car is an old piece of crap. Tell me about the car. Let me decide that it's an old piece of crap. If he's chasing a blonde bombshell or the beautiful brunette girl next door, describe her. Let me decide if she's the blonde bombshell from the high school cheerleading squad, or if she's the secretive dark-haired girl next door that he's like. She's like, paint the picture for me. Let me decide where it goes. And I thought, oh my God, like that's what I wanted to do. I remember talking to her and I said, that's what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to do it. So I cut to the chase so it wouldn't get too wordy. She's like, I don't care. She's like, I don't care if your 5 pages tells me about a single day. And she's like, think about it, Donnie. Sometimes you go watch a 2-hour movie and it's a single court case, right? You go watch something like To Kill a Mockingbird. For the most part, it's like a 4-hour court case. You go watch 12 Angry Men, it's a court case, right? You like, even you watch films such as like A Few Good Men or something like that. It's a sliver of time. It's a sliver of time. And so you start to realize like, oh, it's not about how long of a time I'm covering. It's about the detail that I'm providing to take you along with me. You want to go anyway, so I might as well take you with me. And then when I started hunting, I see everything when I hunt. I started thinking about this. This is the first time I've ever articulated this. I get kind of offended if somebody calls me a trophy hunter. But really, I started thinking about it the other day. I was like, I think I am a trophy hunter. Not in the sense of antlers, but in the sense of I want the experience. I want the whole experience. This is how I describe it, Ryan. I want the oil painting, right? That's what I want. When I shoot my doll sheep, I don't want it to be, I got out of the airplane, I was throwing my bags on the shore of the lake, and I was getting my gun together, and then all of a sudden the guy was like, holy crap, there's a giant doll sheep right there. Just happens to be down here getting a drink out of the lake. Shoot it quick. And I shoot it. Like, that would be horrible for me. I want to organize my pack, and I want to watch the float plane fly away, and I want to hike up into the mountains and set the tent up and watch the sunset, and I want to eat my meals or arrow a willow ptarmigan and butcher it down and cook it over a rock and eat it. I want the whole experience, and then I want my doll sheep, and I want it to have massive horns, and I want it to have a deep twist, and I want it all. And that's when the sense that I was saying the other day, it kind of occurred to me, like, you're maybe the worst kind of trophy hunter, because not only do you want a ram that has massive horns, but I want the trophy experience. That's what I want. I want to be a mountain man. I want to feel like I lived 100 years ago, and not in pretend. I really want to go towards that kind of element of hunting and existing and being a man. And so when I started making films, the first film that I wrote was Rivers Divide, and I wrote it. Kyle Nicolite is my business partner and editor, and I handed him the script for the film, and he's like, man, this is terrible. This is horrible. And I was like, what? What do you mean? And he's like, yeah, I've never heard you talk like this ever. He's like, you wrote this for like the Outdoor Channel. And I said, well, yeah, don't we want people to watch our films? And he said, no. He said, I don't care if this film's watched one time. And he's a film student, like he's the film graduate. He's the one that actually understands film. He's like, we're making this movie for us. This is a movie for you. We're not making this movie for anyone. We don't care if a single person watches this, which is of course bad business, but you have to make your work that honest. You have to live that honest of a life, because otherwise no one's going to watch your work and no one's going to be interested in you, because it's just not real. And so through those different elements, I started to understand, not only am I living my life, but there is a story there. Like, you told a great story. I mean, you sucked me in. Like, I saw your son and his friend. I pictured them 200 yards down the hill, too far away. I was already picturing you yelling to them that you, in the first 7 minutes of your first hunt, just stuck a 300-inch elk. And at first, when you said 3 yards, I thought you meant, Ryan, that he was 3 yards from you. So I just pictured you like just drawing your bow like right here. But then you told me like he's 3 yards from the out, and I could see his. Coincidentally, I lived that exact same hunt in Colorado one time, and I could see a bull's head. I could see his massive antlers, and all of his vitals were behind a little pine tree. and it was just in a wide open meadow. So he was standing, he was rubbing on this little pine tree, and he had a little pine tree next to him. I could see his face, I could see his antlers, his vitals were all covered up, and I could see his guts. I could have shot him in the guts, but I was not ever going to do that. But when you told me that story right away, I was just like, oh man. And I thought, in the first part of the story, you said, hey, the wind was coming up in our face. So I was like, holy cow, the bull came behind you, but he clearly didn't get your wind because your thermals were probably shooting straight up in the air. And you just had that razor's edge to where he had the wind in his face, was traveling with the wind in his face, but you were just off to that edge to get him to go by. But then as mountains do, the wind when I told you about that doll sheep hunt that I was on in the Chugach, Ryan, I had about a 60-mile-an-hour wind in my favor, and the sheep still got my wind because the wind stopped for a half a second, and my whole scent just swirled in that big bowl, and then it started blowing again, and that sheep got up. But that's where it all comes from. It's all these little bits and pieces and things that I've learned from people who are better than I am, and then just understanding just how I see the world in every little detail.
Yeah, well, you wrote me back into my hunting experience. I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, Donnie should tell this story, not me. But yeah, no, it is. And that's something, I mean, I wished I was better at it. This is new. Like I said, this is the first podcast that we're ever doing. Like the whole thing of what we're trying to do with this podcast is like what you've done is I want to help people that are new to hunting have a good experience so that they continue to hunt. And I mean, I look at it as a generational thing. I mean, I've heard you mention this, like no matter who you are, vegan, vegetarian, our ancestors all hunted. We came from hunters. And I think there's something about being able to connect with nature and get back out and hunt that just grounds you in a different way. And I see so many kids today that are just glued to their iPhones and social media. And I mean, I do a little bit of social media. I am by no means an influencer, but I'm going like, if I'm going to do something, I want to do something that I'm passionate about. And I've got a neighbor who does a ton of pheasant hunting. He's got property that he shares with up in Duchesne County with them up there, and he takes youth from the neighborhood up there. And you can see a change in them. Like they get up there, there's no cell phones. And that's my hope, whether it's a father with a son or just inspiring, other youth that are new to hunting, getting them outdoors and reconnecting with nature and the wild. It does something like for your soul that
absolutely.
I think is missing.
This is your first podcast ever, Ryan?
Yep.
You're really good at
First
it.
one. Well, I've got a really good guest that tells the best stories.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the kind words, but yeah, it's, this is new. Like I'm not a outdoor guy. I wasn't an outdoor guy. I worked in sales, played a lot of baseball. I grew up skiing, water skiing. So I spent a lot of time on the lake and that. And so as I'm listening to your canoe story about paddling up and down, I mean, we've been in some gnarly water just in a ski boat where like on a lake that we're at out here, I mean, we're landlocked, right? But I'm powering up, I'm visualizing you paddling up, and then I've got to throttle up so that my nose doesn't go underneath. I mean, because we're going through it's wild, and I just think it's incredible the way that you paint a picture and just capture like the true. To me, it is you capture the true essence of hunting.
I appreciate that.
And I just, everyone that I talk to and that I turn them on, I'm like, just get started. Go on YouTube and watch Winds of Vega. That's like, if you don't know anything about it, like start there. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. Tell me, when you're creating these films and telling stories, and maybe there's nothing there, but do you do it with the intent of speaking to both hunters and non-hunters alike?
Yeah, 100%. I want them to understand. Like you hear a line, this just pops into my head. I don't even know why I did, but in the other side, at the end of the film, when I'm writing like the final monologue, and I say, some bear hunters will tell you that they hunt for skin and skull, but it's only those that really haven't tasted the flesh of bears. And And I mean that. There's a lot of guys out there that'll shoot bears for their skins and their skulls. And to remove a bear from an area, there is a conservation idea to it, but they don't ever take the time. They just give the meat back to Mother Nature, which is also it's legal in some areas, and it is a contribution back to Mother Nature. A lot of people think that if you take an animal's life and the human that killed it doesn't eat it, that it's a waste. And it is a waste to that person, in my opinion, but it's not a waste to Mother Nature. Ravens eat it, eagles eat it, foxes eat it, other bears eat it. The soils take it back. It's the way of Mother Nature. And so, but really that I want to write this, and I want to also behave in this manner. I want to hunt in a manner, both in relationship to the ethics with the animal and to myself. I want to hunt like somebody's watching me at all times. Like, I don't want to ever do anything that's going to cross the boundaries of ethics and take an animal's life. It's not very fair to the animal. It's not fair to myself. And then I want to be able to write for these films in a manner that that a non-hunter can come away with it. I'm not trying to sell them on it. This isn't a persuasive piece. This is me to write honestly about what happened and honestly about my vision of where we're going and what we're doing. But I want to write it in a manner so that it might answer some of their questions and also maybe elicit them to have additional questions where they can seek out a hunter, seek out myself and write and say, hey, you said this, or hey, you're hunting an area where I understand the caribou population is down a little bit. Can you explain to me how you can ethically go in there and take a bull out when the population's already down a little bit? And so my goal is that it's going to elicit a positive response, positive conversations, and maybe I've had a lot of people write to me and say that they now hunt. And I've had young ladies, had these couple of ladies write me and they said, hey, we're not hunters. This made me kind of giggle. They said, we're not hunters, but we both bought bows after we watched Terra Nova. We both went out and bought bows. They went out and bought long bows. And then they live on these two ladies live together and they live on this big farm. And she's like, we go out at night in the evening time and we arrow the rabbits that live on our farm. And we've been skinning the rabbits and making stews and pot pies and like all this stuff. And she's like, we're not hunters. We don't hunt, but we have a beautiful garden and we shoot rabbits. And we're potentially thinking about maybe shooting a deer this year. And so, but she is several times in her letter, she's like, but we're not hunters. And I'm laughing because they are hunters. They're going out several times in a year and arrowing rabbits. They're arrowing cottontails and skinning them. And they're using the flesh for stews and pot pies and different things. And so just because they're not collecting antlers, they're not hanging them on the wall, and they're not reading hunting magazines or going out and buying new guns, they consider themselves not to be hunters, but they are as much hunters as any of us. Because anything in this world, you have a resume, right? There's the kid that goes to kindergarten, and there's the student that graduates with his second doctorate from MIT, and they're both students, right? It's not all that different, even though there's a vast difference in between. And just like I can be categorized similarly to these young ladies who are arrowing rabbits, right? We're both hunters. It's just we're doing things at a different pace, different animals, things like that, but very much so. And I don't do this on purpose. I don't want this to come across as fashion, but it's also one of the reasons that I don't dress head to toe in camouflage. I'm not a guy that dresses head to toe in camouflage, although when I really want to hide from an animal, like if I'm going to kill a deer on the ground or I'm going to kill a turkey on the ground, I wear a lot of ghillies. I do a lot. I almost look like a sniper. And I used to get made fun of quite a bit. I'd show up with buddies to go turkey hunting, and I'd show up in a full ghillie suit, and they're like, what's your deal? And then they started seeing how close I would get to turkeys before I would arrow them. And then now this year, they all showed up in ghillie suits this year. So it's pretty kind of funny. But
yeah, it has its purpose.
It has its purpose. It's a tool. Sure. Camouflage is a tool, right? And so, but it's one of the reasons that I don't just run to dressing head to toe in camouflage. One, you don't need it to get up on animals. You just have to not move as much, stay in the shadows, and really watch your scent, of course. But the other reason is I noticed that when I started wearing regular clothing, Fjallraven or whatever it is that I'm wearing, people respond more because they're like, man, I have those pants, or I have a sweater that looks like that. And gosh, I thought you had to go out and buy all this hunting gear, when really this guy's hunting in pants and a sweater you can buy at, the local backpacking store. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's cool. When I first started hunting, I went out and bought the camel and all that stuff. And what little bit of hunting I've been able to go out and do, scent is the biggest thing. Understanding the winds and what I understand about the areas that I've hunted thus far is they change constantly. When you're in a canyon, you may think you have like your wind nailed down, and it's just constantly swirling.
Yeah.
But yeah. So let me shift gears and kind of just I got another couple of questions just regard to your filmmaking process. So when your films are so visually pleasing, and that's the thing is I think whoever your film guy is, he does an incredible job capturing what you talk about and that. But the other thing too is like the auditory, the music that you put with it. I mean, how much thought and energy goes into pairing that with the message as well as the visual aspects of it?
Yeah, it's everything. So there's two aspects of it. So the visual nature of it. So our director of photography, his name's William Altman. We have an in-house photographer named Forrest Rowe, and then my business partner has shot quite a lot of our work as well, named Kyle Nicolai. And so these guys are brilliant with a camera. They're brilliant at composition. They're brilliant at understanding animals' movements, setting up landscapes, and shooting wildlife, and really splitting down to the nitty gritty to really kind of take the audience along. Several years ago, when I was in college, I took a photography class, and my professor, we had to do this final project, and I photographed this guy in having a cardiovascular arterial repair, and I photographed his procedure, and there's blood, and it's just really kind of cool. You see all the instruments and the position, everything, and one of the pictures had a lot of blood on it, and the patient bled really bad. It was blood all over the patient, all over the table, and all over the floor. And then one of the images, there was a catheter sticking out of the guy's femoral artery, and blood was just spilling out of the catheter. It's a close-up picture of the blood coming out on an arterial pulse. And my professor said, he's like, yeah, this is my favorite photo. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Why that one over some of the other ones that seem to be a little bit more sensational? And he said, never forget, Donnie, the closer you become to something, the more interesting it becomes. And I thought, that is actually always true. So even if you have like a dream car, you're a 1968 Chevy Camaro, and you see one from a parking lot across the street, it's perfect. Like, that's amazing. But if you walk to 100 feet from it, it's even more amazing. And if you go and sit down next to it in Indian style, and you start looking at the metallic paint and the actual pinstriping, you see how the hood sits down in the fender, and you see how the rubber hugs the rims, you start breaking the car down, and let alone if you're a mechanic to understand the mechanics of it, that car becomes far more interesting, just like your hunting will for you, Ryan. The more you learn about elk, and then when you finally take your first animal, when you see your blade, you understand how the skin rides on the muscles and how the muscles ride on the skeletal system, you're going to become intimate with that animal. You're going to be that much more interested in hunting. And so the visual nature of it, we have to take you to where we are, and we have to show you the landscape. We have to show you the massive nature and how small we are on these landscapes. And we want to introduce you the biology of the animals, how they move, and then also the non-game animals, the birds, the insects, snakes, everything that's really going to paint this picture. And we do all that to, I almost said trick your eye, but it's really to bring your eye along. And then on top of that, we have a full-time musician that works here at Sick Manta. And so he's not a hunter at all. He's covered in tattoos. His hair is always a mess. He's an awesome human being. His name's Casey Olson. And he knows nothing of hunting, but he does all of our sound design, which is the sounds that you hear in a film. For instance, in The Rivers Divide, when you hear Steve walk up, I'm sitting in the blind, it's so quiet, you hear his footprints in the grass. Well, that's not Steve. That's us, that we went out with a huge microphone and sat on the edge of a field with similar grass, and we recorded a doe walking by at very close distance at the same cadence that Steve was watching. So we took her highly recorded footsteps and we laid them over Steve's footsteps in the film. because we want to trick your mind, right? You would never hear that deer. I wouldn't anyway, really hearing that deer walk through the grass, but we want the viewer to hear it. When I'm eating the peach in the blind and I'm cutting the peach up and I'm eating it and you see me lick the knife clean and you hear that kind of like, well, that's actually a surgical knife cutting through a human being. That sound when I lick the knife clean.
wow.
And so those are sound design elements. And then on top of it, you have the emotion. So when Steve gets killed and you hear that woman's voice coming on, so that is a song that a friend of mine named Roscoe Westerwald, he has a band called Onward, Etc. He wrote that song for Steve. He wrote that song because those were the lyrics that came to his head when he watched Steve get killed. And then him and Casey, who's our full-time musician, they're playing in a band and they were in Missouri playing a gig. And when they walked in, there was a black girl up on stage. I think she was a black girl. I forget the name of the band. But she was singing they were the band before these guys were going to go on. And she was singing. And Casey walked in. He's like, he's been waiting for this. He walked in. He's like, Roscoe. And he said, yeah. He's like, she's Steve. And Roscoe's like, yup. And so when that lady stopped singing, Casey went up to her and said, hey, this is going to sound strange. I don't have any money. I have $20 in my pocket. It's yours if you want it. I have a microphone in my van. I'm working on a film for a buddy of mine, and he killed this deer with his bow, and we wrote lyrics for this. Will you sing this song for us? I'll give you $20. So she's like, absolutely. So her and him went out to the van. She sang that song in the van in a parking lot in Missouri, and that's the song you hear in The Rivers Divide.
That's awesome. Well, I guess that answers my next question. I see a lot of, you watch a lot of hunting videos on YouTube and that, and I try to learn. I'm like, why don't more guys do the films like Donnie? And it's because it's like a painstaking process.
It's very hard.
If I remember correctly, in The Other Side, you filmed that over 4 years?
Oh, like 7 years.
Was it 7 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like 6.5 years,
So-
something like that.
Yeah, and I guess maybe the other reason is they don't have the patience, because a lot of people are looking to monetize, their hunts and that, and I get that. And I think it's cool that you guys are looking at it going, hey, we're going to do this for us.
Yeah.
For long term. So your films, they're incredible the way, at least they speak to me, and the people that I know that watch your films, I don't know, it's different. And I wish there was more of that in hunting, because there's a lot of people that are just really like, ooh, gross, like you hunt.
Yeah.
And you see some where it's like the TV series, like they want to capture your 15, 20 minutes. So you got to go out there, splice everything together in that intricate detail of, doing that, what your films are, those oil paintings you described,
Yeah.
where you're capturing so many different elements. So that would explain to me why there's probably not more filmmakers out there doing the type of thing. I would love to do that, but I am by no means not a good hunter yet.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep after it.
Yep.
Not a good storyteller. I'm not a good
You are a good
filmmaker.
storyteller. You told a very good story in the beginning. You are a good storyteller.
Well, thank you. That's kind of you to say, but yeah, some work to do. But that detail that you shared about your English teacher, and kind of, don't tell me about the girl or about the car or about whatever. Right? Describe it, like those little details. I think that's where it could get. That's where you capture people's attention.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I guess is where I'm trying to go.
And it's really important. It's important for our work, and it's important. Like I might hunt caribou for 3 or 4 years in Alaska before we come out with a caribou hunting film. And that's why a lot of our stuff is really backlogged, but we now have a really good essence of the things that we've done. And there's really a lot of work that's going to start coming out. And I'm really excited about some of our different techniques, some of our new cameras that we're using, and diving back in. We're going to get very busy. But there's a lot of work that's going to be published. And I'm trying to I even make Kyle, my business partner, I'm like, you got to promise me that this work's going to come out even if I get killed in an airplane crash or or like, this work's gotta get published. He's like, yeah, I promise it'll come out.
I'm excited. I know there's going to be a lot of people that hear this podcast, and they're going to hear that you've committed to it. You're going to do one film a year.
At least. Yeah.
So that's awesome. So first one coming out Q1 2025. I can't wait. Donnie, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, getting to know a little bit more about you and the process of how you create your films. And again, it's fun to hear all the different stories that you share. And you do. I really, truly believe that you are inspiring the next generation of hunters, and getting them to where it's something that they want to do for life. I mean, it brings people in and gets them excited. So thank you for being so gracious with your time today. And if there's one last little bit of advice that you would tell somebody that's new to hunting, just maybe like the mental side of it, like what parting words would you leave for somebody?
First and foremost, I would say that there's a ecologist naturalist named Aldo Leopold, and he wrote a book a very long time ago about a farm that he owned in Wisconsin called the Sand County Almanac. And I would say that everyone that hunts should read that book and understand the natural systems and the impact that humans have on it, and then kind of the balance that hunters enter that system. I think that's very, very good. And then also to try to digest all the hunting content out there with a lens. There's a lot of things that you can do with the trickery of a camera. There's a lot of things that you can do to make animals. I just think there's way too much. There's a lot of celebration out there from people, and it's easy to look at things like Instagram or Facebook and for young people to get jealous about other things that people are accomplishing. But don't let that rot your mind. You can have the biggest adventures of your life in your own backyard. You just have to be present, and you just have to be mindful. And whether that's with a 22 long rifle and you're squirrel hunting, or a longbow and you're shooting rabbits, it's how you hunt and who you are that really lays out what the adventure is and what the experience is. And don't let pictures from some far off land with some big antlered animal, don't let that dissuade you at all. That's not really that's their experience. That's not your own. And you can really cultivate a really amazing experience on your own.
Awesome. Appreciate those words, Donnie. Thank you again. Really appreciate your time. For people that want to learn more, you can go to DonnieVincent.com. You can download his films, like I said, Apple, Amazon Prime. I mean, pretty much anywhere you can buy a digital version of the film. And then again, go check out Winds of Adak on YouTube. Donnie, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Hey guys, want to thank you for sticking around and watching the podcast. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Leave us a review, and we'd love for you to share it with your friends. Also want to tell you about Hunt Stealth. We've partnered with them, and we are giving away a pheasant hunt guided experience. It's at the Pleasant Valley Hunting Preserve. Some of the world's best wired-haired German pointers are going to be out there helping guide you on your pheasant hunt. You're also going to get a 1-year membership to the club, as well as Cata Sports is providing a 1-person hammock. We've got 2 tripod stools, a Northward Series backpacking tent for 1 person, a Horizon folding cot, and a 60-quart ice vault that's got on wheels. So it's super, super cool package. Also, ReadyWise, our good friends over there, are giving us 3 3-day adventure bag meal kits for you to take out, for you to use on your next adventure. So head on over to huntstealth.com, and for every $1 spent, you get 1 entry into that contest. Again, thanks for listening.